Thanks a lot, Dana, and thanks a lot, everybody, for joining us today on what is a cold and snowy day here in Kentucky. It looks like most folks are in the southeast. I hope you guys are experiencing some warmer weather than we are here in Kentucky. So I'm going to just take a step back from Ray's presentation, give you just a little brief overview of who the Nature Conservancy is and how our work came to touchdown in cities, which may come to a surprise to some of you on the phone as you think of us as more of a land conservation, land trust type of organization. And then I'm going to bring the resolution into Louisville a little more to paint the picture of kind of what's going on here in this urban laboratory we call Louisville and what's helping drive us into these new, what we think of as extraordinary collaborations with folks like Ray and Dr. Aruni Bhatnagar, these phenomenal cardiologists at the University of Louisville, with our city government partners to all kind of huddle up on these core issues, and then how the Green Heart Project is attempting to tackle those issues and how we hope to scale this work beyond just Louisville to many cities around the world. So just a very quick overview on the Nature Conservancy. We're a environmental, a conservation NGO or a nonprofit organization, and we really got our start in the 50s as a land trust, and our work really has been deeply rooted since then in protecting terrestrial spaces, interestingly, mostly from the impact of people. And that work grew to begin to encompass freshwater systems as we realized, hey, saving the land isn't quite enough. Everything ends up in waterways, and we began to scale our work to all 50 states in the U.S. and then beyond the United States border to touch down on other projects through global relationships that also took our work beyond freshwater to marine systems, looking at coral restoration, looking at fisheries, sustainable fisheries, and aquaculture. So we've grown from this land trust to this organization, land trust based in the United States, to this organization touching down in actually a little more over 70 countries now with our work. And we're a science-based organization, which is really important for our mission and our objectives. We lead by science. We're nonpartisan, non-confrontational, pragmatic, science-based. And that's allowed us to really kind of make a transition from the land trust space, which we helped kind of launch in the U.S., which is really doing well now with lots of other land trusts, to kind of move more into what we like to call a global problem-solving organization. And what led our work to cities was really circling up around 5 or 6 years ago, where we really got serious about adding climate and cities to our overall kind of buckets of work, because we really began to recognize that that the world we live in, our world, is changing, and that world is going to look dramatically different in the future. Here's a map of kind of current global population trends, actually 2010 population trends, where there were around 7 billion people on the planet. And as we jump ahead to 2050, we begin to see somewhere between 9.5 billion people on the planet. So topping out somewhere in the mid-9 billions are the projections. And of these 9.5 billion people that are going to be on this wonderful planet we call home, it's projected that around 80% of them will be living in cities. So we're actually in the midst of the largest on-land migration of any species the planet has ever seen, and it's people moving into cities. And I actually read a recent study that shows that over 1 million people every day are moving into a city in the world. That's just mind-blowing. It's fascinating. And an organization like the Nature Conservancy, who has been trying to protect intact natural systems around the world, we actually think that's a wonderful thing. Densely populated, built-up urban cores have the potential to minimize and reduce the impacts on the landscape around them to the systems around them, the systems that these cities will depend upon for fresh water, for food, and for energy. So we really we embrace this cities movement that no one can stop, and and we recognize that it will have a profound impact on the cities, the space, the land masses around cities, but also there's a really great opportunity to think about how to create more sustainable cities. Anyone on this call, it looks like quite a few are from city government, know that our infrastructures in our cities need massive amounts of investment to be able to cope with the conditions we have today, the aging infrastructure that we have today, and let alone how do we think about the bulging demand and populations of the future and what role our infrastructure will play on creating resilient and healthy cities that are vibrant and thriving and that attract talented people to come say, this is where I want to be home. So about 3 years ago, the Nature Conservancy launched it was a little over 3 years ago, launched a cities network. We said we're going to set up shop in cities in the U.S. We're going to create a network where we cross-pollinate across all of these different cities, what we're learning, and we share in a true network format how we bring our work into cities and what partnerships with local city governments and with local nonprofits and academic institutions can look like. And Louisville is one of the founding cities. Originally it was 10 cities 3 years ago, and now we've grown somewhere around 25 cities, a little over 20 in the U.S., and we've got 5 cities globally, and we're rapidly expanding our Global Cities program now. So it's really exciting to be sharing in a network the learnings from what's happening from one community to another and drawing expertise from different geographies to help out when needed. So now I'm going to really bring the resolution into Louisville, Kentucky. Ray showed you a map and referred to it as Jefferson County. So Louisville, Kentucky is a combined city-county government. We merged in the early 2000s. And what that means now is that Jefferson County combines with the city, and we're now, Louisville's roughly 400 square miles. When we refer to Louisville, that's the geography we're talking about. It's about 400 square miles. We are a riparian city along the banks of the mighty Ohio River. We were reminded of its mightiness 2 weeks ago when it crested 13 feet over flood stage, inundating parts of our community. But Louisville is a wonderful city. It's got a lot of great things going on. We're home to the greatest 2 minutes in sports, the Kentucky Derby. A third of the world's bourbon supply flows through Louisville out to the rest of the world. Louisville Slugger baseball bats are from here. Kentucky Fried Chicken based here. So lots of kind of iconic images that folks may recognize. But I'm going to share with you a few lists that Louisville tops that aren't so great of a distinction. The American Lung Association has given us an F for the last 6 years in a row for our air quality. We have the fastest growing documented urban heat island effect of any city in the United States out of a 50-city study. We're not the hottest city in the U.S. Phoenix, Arizona is, but data is showing that we're warming per decade at twice the rate of Phoenix. Thanks to our great colleagues, Dr. Yeager and others at the University of Louisville, we now have this, well, I should say thanks, or maybe some other choice words, we have this wonderful distinction of being known as the coronary valley. The Ohio Valley has elevated rates of heart disease, diabetes, obesity. So we have this wonderful distinction of the coronary valley, and that carries around a $650+ million annual price tag in Louisville in our community. And we also have a rapidly declining urban tree canopy. The Metro Louisville government commissioned a urban tree canopy assessment 3 years ago that documented the current state of our canopy, and using aerial historic imagery, kind of modeled the rate of loss over since the mid to early 2000s to 2012. And we're realizing we're losing percents off our canopy every year. And there are a few things driving that. We have non-native forest pests like the emerald ash borer, wiping out 15% of our existing canopy. Louisville lacks robust tree protection ordinances and land use development codes that really kind of protect, steward, and provide for the succession of our urban forests. So, there are some significant kind of drivers, and we're routinely one of the worst cities to live in the country if you have asthma. We top the asthma capital list. So from an environmentally overburdened position, Louisville's not the healthiest place to live. And Metro Louisville government has taken many proactive steps over the last handful of years under our current administration to try to understand this with a science-based approach. So commissioning an urban tree canopy assessment, an urban heat island management plan, creating centers for health equity to look at, well, where does this stuff touch down? And the Metro Louisville government has just released their third, they release every 3 years, a health equity report. And this report outlines essentially a 13-year difference in life expectancy between low-income communities and middle to upper-income communities. And when you overlay life expectancy and different health outcomes with urban tree canopy assessment, these communities happen to be the communities that have the least percent of canopy or access to nature. They have the highest percentage of air quality issues. They're the hot spots on the urban heat island map. So we begin to tell us this story of the nature deficit parts of our community are suffering, and those who stand to gain the most from nature-based services are giving the most, and it's in their life expectancy, 13 years difference. So some bright spot here is Louisville also has some great political leadership from the top down, from our mayor through our director of sustainability to now our chief resiliency officer, as we were one of the last cities to make it into the Rockefeller 100 RC Resilient Cities program, to our health equity folks, all circling around with our academic partners and with local leaders and nonprofits to figure out how do we crack this nut. The urban tree canopy assessment essentially highlighted that, to get the tree canopy back up to healthy successional levels, we may be looking at a $500 million to $1 billion investment over the next 3 decades. So that led us all to the table to think about extraordinary partnerships and collaborations that are non-traditional. Folks like me who have been working on urban forestry initiatives in the community for many years began to realize we don't need a healthy canopy for the canopy's sake. We need it for our sake. Our health depends on it. Our children's health depends on it. Our grandparents' health depends on it. So back into the Green Heart Project to kind of pick up where Ray left off. It is this, to the first of our knowledge, at this scale experiment to take at the multi-neighborhood scale an approach to use nature and greenness to drive better health outcomes, looking at the mechanisms of improving air quality, looking at ultrafine particulate matter and PM2.5 and VOCs, and using this mechanism of nature to kind of filter the air to try to provide better health outcomes, while also looking at stress factors, social cohesion, community capital, social capital issues to figure out what role nature is playing here in potentially promoting a healthy, safe neighborhood. So to zero back in on the project area of interest, it's actually 4 neighborhoods that all intersect. It's a low-income to lower middle-income neighborhood, set of neighborhoods. Ray, Dr. Yeager, as the health geographer, can really answer some more detailed questions as to the inclusion criteria that really led us into this, the zero into this space. But within the project area of interest, we have around 22,000 residents across the 4 neighborhoods. Our preliminary prioritization modeling is telling us we think we can get around 8,000 large mature trees into the neighborhood. And we will be doing and our partners at the University of Louisville will be conducting a rigorous clinical trial, needing to recruit around 700 folks to take part in that. And what we'll be doing is there will be portions of these 4 neighborhoods that will essentially we will be looking for nature deficit areas, and we'll be prescribing greenness to those areas. And when we say greenness, that doesn't just mean shade trees. That means looking at species from a forb graminoid perennial layer all the way through a shrub to an understory to an overstory assemblage, essentially mimicking our native regional biomes, our suites of species that coexist together, looking for opportunities to really bring together full palettes of plant communities to filter the air. The neighborhood, again, 22,000 residents. Some neighborhoods in the project area actually are a majority African American, 60+%, but the average out over the 4 neighborhoods combined is 15% African American, almost 2% Hispanic, and the household income is $27,300 per year. It's approximately 2,000 acres, and it's somewhere between 25, probably more likely 21% existing canopy, which is kind of right there, as Dr. Yeager said, in the middle. We couldn't go to a place that had 7% tree canopy, nor could we go to a place that had 40%. We needed to try to be somewhere in the middle there. So what we have done with our partners is get access to as much GIS data as we could to bring into resolution what are the opportunities in the community, what is the literature around air pollution. We know the big drivers of ultrafine particulate matter and of VOCs and PM2.5 is transportation corridors and diesel and auto emissions. And so we have a federal highway kind of cutting right through the middle of these project areas, many state roads and city roads also bisecting the project area. And these are vectors. These are sources for air pollution, and we have communities, houses of worship, commercial properties, all residing in these corridors that the literature tells us are polluted. So we kind of have some understanding from the literature and from prior air quality monitoring exercises that there is, a decay rate for these pollutants before they mix and disperse. And so what we're looking at is prescribing nature into these nature deficit areas within these buffered areas around heavy transportation corridors where we think the air pollution is likely to be problematic and available to be breathed in. And then also looking at needing to have populations, people learning, living, working, and playing in these areas as well, so they have exposure to the air pollution or to the greenness that gets installed and can be a part of the clinical trial, recruited into the trial so we can potentially show effect. And when we talk about these biomes, we kind of have dubbed this word, actually our partner at the Hyphae Urban Design Lab likes to refer to these vegetative interventions as biofilters. So looking at designing nature and the way it's curated and installed to filter the air, to act as an air filter. So trees, they have this wonderful ability to take up a variety of air pollutants, including ozone and nitrogen oxides, and they do this through the absorption of their pores or their stomata. But they also have this wonderful ability to actually just capture and resuspend PM2.5 and ultrafine particulate matter. So if you're looking at a tree species that has a larger leaf surface area, it's more effective at capturing air pollution. If it's got a hairy or sticky cuticle to its leaf, it's really great at capturing this particulate air pollution as it's flowing through. So if we can work with designers, we're working with many partners doing fluid dynamic modeling to really think through the spacing, the packing densities in areas, say, along a federal highway where we have more opportunity to do larger plantings. We're really looking at the science and the modeling behind the specific species selection. These species also have to be vetted with the horticultural field and the nursery industry to even make sure that they're available to get in quantity. But looking at species and how we create and design these little ecosystems to maximize air filtration and capture resuspension or absorption of air pollution. So what we've done to date is we've launched the project with the community. We had a successful launch event this past October of 2017, that was well attended by over 300 community groups, city leadership, and academic partners. We have a robust community engagement team that is actually contracting community liaisons, folks who live in the neighborhood, to work for the project to help us create that allyship with the community to create the environs to have all of this work even take place. Last week we had a restaurant night in the community that was well attended. Tonight we have beer with a scientist. Dr. Bhatnagar, the PI of the project, will be at a local microbrewery taking questions and talking about the project. We're hosting a neighborhood fair coming up in April. And we're creating prioritized lists of key champions, stakeholders within the community, ranking them, whether they're in the faith community, the business, or residential, and beginning to just go one by one through that list and take meetings, because we hope to co-create what the greening interventions look like with the community leadership. So as opposed to us saying, this is exactly what we want to do in the neighborhood, we want to co-create that with design charrettes with folks in the community, because it's important to note the Nature Conservancy or the City of Louisville, or none of the partners are seeking conservation easements or any other easements for the land that we're going to be enhancing or greening. This will all be done on city, state, federal right-of-ways, private properties, commercial properties, houses of worship, and metro government parks that happen to be within the project area. We've also contracted hyperspectral survey imagery to be flown. The project is not only about just installing new nature, but stewarding the existing resource we have today. As I mentioned, EAB, the emerald ash borer, is wreaking havoc. So we wanted to understand, what are the current baseline conditions that we have? What are the genuses of species that are out there, and what's the health of them? So we were able to do that with hyperspectral survey. We worked with the City of Louisville to treat all public right-of-way ash trees that were still viable candidates to conserve them from emerald ash borer, and we're going to continue to do that for the next 5 years. We will be doing air monitoring, intensive air monitoring in the project area. We have begun by doing some mobile monitoring platforms, driving roads and alleys through the community. We will be getting an electric vehicle, equipping that with more sophisticated equipment, and that will be running certain grids a dozen times a year for the next 5 years for the neighborhood. We'll also be setting up a stationary met station and air quality monitoring station to run continuous monitoring for the next 5 years. And we'll also be deploying passive air samplers seasonally for the next 5 years. So mobile monitoring, passive, and continuous site monitoring. All of this baseline work happens before any of the trees get planted. So understanding the air pollution situation in the community, understanding the current ecological picture of the community, doing intensive community engagement now ahead of the recruitment of the cohort of participants, which will begin in March. And we hope to have full recruitment completed before any greening interventions start. So at the earliest, the greening begins this fall, with more intensive greening really happening next year, 2019 spring and fall, hopefully finishing up by fall of 2019. And then we'll monitor, steward all of the interventions, and check back in with the community many times between now and then do kind of during clinical assessments once the baseline is complete, and then doing post-greening. So I don't know if you were able to tell on the St. Margaret Mary, the Green for Good slide that Dr. Yeager showed, but there were some very large trees that were transplanted. In fact, we transplanted 8 to 10-inch diameter, 10-inch caliper trees for that project area, because we need immediate effect from trees. It would take a long time to sit around and wait for all of these trees to grow to try to maximize health or air quality improvements. So we know we can't get 8,000 8-inch caliper trees and keep them all alive, but when we will be seeking opportunities to do large-scale transplanting of species when feasible. So this is just a quick little outline of some milestones, and I'm also really happy to report that we have initial funding coming in, the University of Louisville does, through a Superfund grant to the University of Louisville to get the project, the clinical research kicked off for the project. And now the Green Heart Project specific research strategy was just scored in the 5th percentile with the National Institute of Health, and we feel really great about getting federal funding to support the clinical trial and all of the cohort recruitment, which is just very exciting. So you may be wondering who's doing all this work, so I'll quickly just touch on the core partners. Of course, the University of Louisville leading the cardiology, all the clinical research strategy, the big grant writing with NIH. The Nature Conservancy is doing a significant amount of fundraising around the greening, and we're also contributing to the greening research strategy and weighing in on community engagement. The Institute for Healthy Air, Water, and Soil is a local Louisville-based nonprofit that has deep community ties and is focused on the nexus of human health and the environment and uncovering that role. The Washington University of St. Louis is Dr. Jay Turner, who is the lead investigator for the air quality monitoring work. So that's being led by WashU. And the Hyphae Design Lab is a firm based out of Oakland, California, that is kind of the brains behind the biofilter. But beyond the core, we have a ton of partners, and this is just a snapshot, but of course the U.S. Forest Service is a wonderful partner in helping us think through the economic issues, the community engagement work, looking at some social science opportunities to roll up our sleeves and co-study some wonderful social science opportunities. Of course, the NIH with some leadership support. We've got researchers from Berkeley, UC, and from Cornell looking at the fluid dynamic modeling and helping us think through the right species and the palette of species and the packing and density and size of these, and how does that change the air on the ground at ground level once these biofilters are installed, beginning to run models to try to project what kinds of effects we might get. So another thing that is really kind of motivating the Nature Conservancy to do this work is, you know, I'm a Louisvillian and love Louisville and Louisville's home, so this opportunity to do this transformational work here to improve our community and hopefully scale it throughout the community once we get this new science is really exciting, because I think there are billions of dollars there that the urban forestry movement currently isn't tapping into because the health connection has yet to be really robustly proven. So that excites me about improving environments in Louisville, but also we have cities around the world. I mean, Louisville's not alone. There are 1,000 other cities around the world that are dealing with air pollution issues and health issues. And so we feel really excited about the Louisville Urban Laboratory helping to inspire what a new blueprint or greenprint for creating a healthy city looks like. We've already had colleagues from Melbourne, Australia come from halfway around the world to see what we're up to because they're interested in this work. So Beijing, Dallas, Nashville, you know, there are countless other cities that are looking to try to replicate what we're doing here or learn what works or what doesn't work. So that really excites the Nature Conservancy to think about the transformational science and publishing this literature to help to inspire the policymakers at the municipal level to begin to embed these nature-based urban forestry ethics into how we do business in our cities so we can thrive in the future. So I think I went a little long. Ray, you were a little short. I hope we're doing okay on time, and I will stop there, and we can hand it over to you, Dana.